Hello and welcome. Today we're going to break down a really powerful homily that Father Blair gave for the first Sunday of Lent. He uses these two incredible, unforgettable stories to get right to the heart of some huge Christian ideas: sin, sacrifice, redemption. What's great about it is that it's not really a lecture. It's more of a map showing how these giant theological concepts actually connect directly to our own lives. So Father Blair's homily kicks off with a mystery. It's this simple, very personal, and kind of cryptic message found carved on a gravestone right after the American Civil War. Behind just these 5 words is an amazing story about what it means for one person to stand in for another. The story starts with a farmer named Blake. Now, when he gets drafted into the Civil War, it's basically a death sentence, not just for him, but for his family, who relies completely on him. You can just imagine the fear. He's trapped, facing this impossible choice. And then something just extraordinary happens. A young neighbor, a guy named Charles Durham, CD, get it? He comes to Blake with this incredible offer. He says, "I'll go in your place." This was a thing called substitution, and it was legal back then. But wow, what a staggering personal sacrifice. And Blake, he accepted. Tragically, Charles Durham was killed in his very first battle. When Blake got the news, he went and brought the body back himself and carved that simple, powerful memorial. And the wording here is so important. He doesn't just write, "He died." He writes, "He died for me." It's this deeply personal recognition of what Charles did for him specifically.
So this is where Father Blair uses this very human story as a framework, right? It becomes this gut-wrenching, relatable way to understand a concept that is absolutely central to Christian theology, this idea of a substitute, one person willingly taking the penalty for another. It's an idea that feels both ancient and incredibly personal at the same time.
Okay, so Charles Durham's sacrifice saved Blake from the war. That makes sense. But the homily uses this to ask a much bigger question. Why was a spiritual sacrifice, a divine substitute, needed for all of us? And the answer? Well, it takes us all the way back to the beginning, to the concept of original sin. As the homily explains it, original sin isn't something bad that you did. It's the state we're all born into. It's this idea that our human nature has been fractured, that our original perfect unity with God was broken because of that first act of disobedience in the garden. And because of that inherited fracture, that brokenness, we're all left vulnerable to what the homily calls the threefold lust. You can see this exact pattern back in the story from Genesis, right? The fruit was good for food, that's the lust of the flesh. It was pleasing to the eyes, the lust of the eyes. And it was desirable for gaining wisdom, to be like gods, and that's the pride of life. This becomes the template for all temptation. This slide really shows the direct consequences of that original break. Father Blair points to what theology calls the 4 wounds to our human nature. Our minds are clouded, we experience suffering, we face death, and we have this built-in inclination towards sin. These are the fundamental problems that a savior would have to fix. And that leads to this really powerful parallel that's at the heart of the homily. See, if one man's choice in a garden got us into this mess, then the solution had to come from another man's choice, a choice that perfectly reverses that original disobedience. This is where Father Blair unpacks the core argument from St. Paul's letter to the Romans. And you can see this perfect symmetry, right? Through one man's disobedience in a garden, condemnation came to everyone. But through one man's perfect obedience in a desert, the door to life was open for everyone. It's this incredible contrast. The homily really drives this point home. Christ's temptation in the desert wasn't random. It directly mirrors and reverses that threefold lust from the garden. The temptation to turn stones to bread, that's the lust of the flesh. Being shown all the kingdoms of the world, lust of the eyes. And the challenge to jump from the temple to prove he was the Son of God, that's the pride of life. Where Adam failed, Christ obeyed. But look, knowing all of this intellectually, that's one thing. The homily then pivots back to the deeply personal. It asks, what does it take to actually feel the weight of this truth? And to answer that, we get another incredibly powerful story. So, this story is about a Catholic soldier during World War II who'd fallen away from the faith. He and his friends are kind of making fun of religion, and on a dare, he goes to the chaplain to make a totally insincere confession. He just keeps telling the priest, "I couldn't care less." Now, instead of getting mad, the priest does something amazing. He gives the soldier this simple penance. Go look at a crucifix and say 2 things together, out loud. First, the truth of the sacrifice, and second, his own indifference to it. So the soldier goes back to his friends, they're all jeering, and he's ready to perform this penance as a big joke.
He looks at the crucifix, he opens his mouth, but when he's faced with that image of suffering, the only words that come out are the first part. You died for me. He tries again, but he just cannot bring himself to say, and I couldn't care less.
And in that moment, something just breaks inside him. The truth moves from his head to his heart. That wall of indifference just shatters. And totally overcome with emotion, he runs back to the priest to make a real, genuine confession. That intellectual fact suddenly became a personal reality.
And this is how the homily brings it all home. Father Blair weaves these two stories together, the Civil War substitute and the soldier's confession, to pose the central challenge of the Lenten season. It's a question that's aimed squarely at every single person listening.
So the homily doesn't end with a neat little summary. It leaves us with this question, a question for us to examine ourselves. We have the knowledge, right? Just like that soldier did. We understand the story of substitution, just like Farmer Blake did. But does that knowledge actually change us? Does it move from our head to our heart? The question becomes intensely personal. He died for me. How much do I care? Is it enough to radically transform my life? And that is the challenge Father Blair's homily leaves us to think about.